Tons of news around training camps in the NFL. Raiders, Wilkins, that story gets weirder. We've got extensions. TJ Watt, Slater, Stewart is now signed, and a whole lot more on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. Thanks for hanging with us this offseason and now preseason. We actually have action. We have pads going on at practices around the NFL. And, of course, we're going to get Matt's report from Steelers camp probably on tomorrow's episode. And we're going to hear some pads and helmets clacking a little bit at camp. So things start to get very real and a lot more fun for NFL fans. And so I'm glad to be in this portion of now the preseason rather than the off season. But it was a lot of fun seeing how these teams were built. And I hope you had fun hanging out with us as we talked about a lot of those things. We get to talk a little bit more about what's going on the field. We got some new signings this week as well. So make sure you are subscribed up to Peacock and Williamson on YouTube and anywhere you listen to your podcasts, and hit us up on Twitter at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL or on the YouTube comments to get involved in this week's mailbag episode of P&W. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time, the Game Time app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Welcome back from vacation, Matt. I hope you had a good reset and get that in. Get some. Actually, you weren't. I was going to say get some sunshine, but you're more in a cabin atmosphere, right? For your summer vacation, maybe away. Because I know you weren't available via text message. You were away from society for a little bit.
Quite a bit. We go every year. It's like I told you, it's like the highest point in Pennsylvania. It's in the mountains. It's a lake. You know, my family's super involved, especially my wife, and we see a lot of the same people, and it's great. And not exactly super comfy or any of those type of things. And then late in that week, that 7-day vacation, I go back and forth from Deer Valley to Latrobe, to St. Vincent's. And it's about equally as uncomfortable in a tiny dorm with terrible beds, better food, different things to do. But I go back and forth for 3 days in a row, and then my family comes home after the family vacation, and I just kind of move into the dorms and did that for the 4-day acclimation period for the Steelers, did those 4 shows, and then they're off today. We're recording this Monday, of course. And so I was actually home for the first time in like 10 days. And then I'm going to go back full time to Latrobe. So nice. I love it, but it's not exactly the comforts of home.
So we will get the full Steelers training camp report from Matt tomorrow from his dorm in Latrobe, PA. So that one should be a lot of fun. Check out Peacock and Williamson tomorrow afternoon. That episode will drop. Today, there is a little Steelers news we haven't talked about, which was the TJ Watt extension. TJ Watt got re-upped. Rashawn Slater, as of this morning, I think the ink is on paper now. It was rumored to be happening yesterday, and it looks like a 4-year extension for Chargers tackle Rashawn Slater, and Ferguson with the Cowboys has a new deal. And I think Shemar Stewart is probably one of the biggest ones, knowing that at least the Bengals got one of their defensive ends in camp. Their first rounder in Shemar Stewart now is finally signed. Let's start, though, with the TJ Watt extension, because that happened right after you went on vacation. And I was a little bit surprised, but I guess I shouldn't have been surprised by the money, but he got just a little bit more than Myles Garrett, which makes him the highest paid defensive end in the NFL. And you look back at some past extensions, Nick Bosa's wasn't that long ago. He's like the 5th highest paid defensive end in the NFL. Starts to look like a deal that the 49ers got, because this money's going crazy for these pass rushers.
Yeah, as you can imagine, even though I was on vacation, I did a bunch of work on the contract, and the numbers are a little surprising. A little surprisingly high, to be honest with you. I thought he would be neck and neck with Garrett. Same draft class. He's had a more productive career if you just look at the numbers, but I think Garrett's a slightly better player right now, but we can go back and forth on that. Steeler fans hate nothing more than when I say that, but that's when I get my house egged. But obviously they're both incredible. and they both had incredible careers, and they're still playing really, really well. But Watt, I thought would be closer to Garrett in APY, and he got more guaranteed money, even though the contract is shorter. So over a shorter amount of period, I think it was 20 million more guaranteed than Garrett. Now, this is a 4-year deal, but the Steelers, if he gets injured or falls off or whatever, you could get out of it after 3 and only have a small amount of dead money. So you can look at it that way. And what I found really interesting, BP, is some of these players haven't realized how much inflation has gone up and how much the cap has gone up. Some of these agents and players are still doing, I just want $1 more than the highest paid out there. And other teams are like, great, because the cap went up 20%. I'll give you a 1%.
Right. You should get $20 more. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. I mean, give me 20% more than that guy. So I heard a podcast about this, that since COVID, my numbers are close. I'm not sure they're exact. The cap has gone up 34% since COVID. That's over a 3-year stretch. But the top salaries, the top like 5 or 10 salaries, have not gone up close to 34% at any position except for edge rusher. The edge rushers market has realized if the cap's going up 34%, the top guys should get 34% more, and the Watt and Garrett contracts reflect that in a big way. And I think it's really going to complicate Hendrickson, and I think Parsons is going to blow the doors off Watt.
And I want to talk about wide receiver money with you, because it's gone up a lot as well. And I think that maybe it shouldn't have, but I think edge rushers it should have. I think it's
I totally get it.
Quarterback then edge rusher is the order it should go, and that's where it is right now in the NFL as far as money. I do feel like wide receivers too close to edge rushers, in my opinion.
Real quick, and this is what I've been telling Steeler fans. They're like, but boy, that's a lot more than Garrett, or it's noticeably more than Garrett. That's a lot more than everybody else. And I've been trying to explain that edge rushers are getting this money. 2 reasons stand out to me. Defenses really want to rush 4. Take away the explosives, keep too high shell, cover 4. And if I have Watt, Garrett, Hendrickson, Bosa, Parsons, etc., my 4-man rush, almost no matter what the other 3 are doing, is at least going to be good, and it can be elite. And the other thing, like if you go look at defensive player of the year odds, it's all those same guys too. And it's probably the most consistent year-to-year position on defense. Like corners are kind of all over the place. I had a bad year, but then he had 3 good ones. Like you kind of know what you're buying at that position.
Yeah, especially with the top guys, and maybe the sack numbers look a little bit different. But then when you get deeper into it, you look at pressures, and it starts, pass rush win rates. It starts to
double teams they attach. That stuff too, right?
The quarterback rolled toward them a few more times this season than the other season, or the guy on the other side helped them out a little bit more and pushed them that way. And so,
like Watt's sacks numbers were down a little because I think he was coming off like a 20 sack season. I think it went down to 13. But he had like Pro Football Focus's best run defense grade they've ever given an edge defender. Led the league in forced fumbles. Gets doubled every snap. Like he's not declining. He just didn't have as many sacks. You know what I mean?
Right. And so, and that was the first thing I asked you about the Watt extension. It was like, okay, got more than Myles Garrett. Is there funny money? It was kind of the other way around. It was not.
No, he got a good deal
for TJ Watt's deal. So Garrett 40, Watt 41 per year, I think it is, right? Which means
he's going to get a lot of it no matter what.
And that means that Micah Parsons, who is at Cowboys camp, that means he's going to get 42, right? Is that how it's going to go?
I wonder if he gets 45 because he's so much younger than those guys.
He hasn't done all the previous extensions, though. So does that hurt him from a bargaining standpoint? Do you have to get to the 3rd extension before you really break things?
The superstars seem to really cash out on the 3rd one.
Right.
The superstars, the defensive player of the year guys, But anyone that watched Parsons, which a lot of people didn't because the Cowboys are out of it, but when he came back from his injury last year, I thought he was the best defensive player on the planet.
And the long national nightmare is over. Stewart and the Cincinnati Bengals, the 1st-round pick, have come to an agreement. And really what ended up doing it looks like there was a $500,000 bonus that was paid now instead of later, and they all came together, and Shemar Stewart now has been signed. And I think this morning I just saw a report that he had a couple of PBUs, not necessarily sacks, but getting his hands on the football at the line of scrimmage, using that big old long frame of his to impact Cincinnati Bengals camp. So I'm sure Bengals fans are happy about getting one of their two holdout defensive ends in camp.
And in this instance, I'm sure everyone's like, well, why did it take so long? Bengals are so hard-headed and they're so set in their ways. And there's probably validity to that. Don't get me wrong. But hopefully in week 4, this kid has 2 sacks and he's a starter and you don't even bring it up again. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to talk about it now, but once the season starts rolling, maybe we never even bring it up again. You know,
slow down. That's twice as many sacks as he had in college last year.
I know. I almost just said like 2 in the first 6 weeks. Yeah.
Of anybody to get into camp the earliest, right, and start honing that pass rush skill set. So Shemar Stewart in camp, Trey Hendrickson not. I do want to mention a couple of notes on the holdouts in Trey Hendrickson and a hold in now, it looks like, with Terry McLaurin in Washington. There's some injuries from camps, which is always something that's going to happen. We don't know how long Mixon might miss time for the Houston Texans, who always seem to be having problems with the injury bug in Houston over there, and a whole lot more of the Wilkins story with the Raiders. Christian Wilkins getting a little bit weirder too. More information on that next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's that time of year, getting your draft boards ready for your fantasy drafts, and fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get those draft boards ready, find your sleepers, buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. And I mean, this is the season for overreactions right now in training camp. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy, and of course, I'm playing on Yahoo Fantasy. And you should too, whether you're a first timer or a veteran making your millionth league. And yeah, I am making my millionth league, and I've been playing Yahoo Fantasy since the 90s, Matt, which is kind of crazy, right?
Wow.
I'm sure it's been since the late 90s for you, because they've been doing it for 28 years. And to celebrate those 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Can you remember your first Yahoo Fantasy League, Matt, fantasy football? Because I think it was somewhere around 1999. I remember playing, I think it was actually fantasy baseball maybe at that time. I can't remember if I started fantasy baseball before fantasy football. And then fantasy.
I think I did. I definitely did.
Yeah.
But I didn't stick with baseball because the Pirates are dead to me. I do remember, though, I'm guessing 4 years of my beginning fantasy football life, my buddy, the commissioner, would have to wait until Tuesday, go buy a Sporting News, get out the pen and paper, add everyone's stuff up, then puts it in an envelope with a stamp on it. It comes to your house by Thursday, and you figured out if you won or lost, and you hope that he tallied things right, which I'm sure he never did.
Wow. And yeah, those leagues used to be a lot simpler, and it was just the counting stats. It was no ratios. There was no batting averages. There was no ERA.
This was football for me, but yeah.
It was like 4x4 in baseball, and it was, runs, home runs, and an RBI or something like that. It was like, it was very simple, and Matt's over here chiseling it in stone.
Right.
Finally, Yahoo comes around and is like, we're going to make it a lot easier, and we're going to tally this stuff for you, and you can draft online, and
this internet thing's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Oh, it really helped fantasy sports to take off. I do remember hearing about those fantasy leagues on pen and paper. I did not quite do it that early in the game, but late 90s, I got involved. It was 98 or 99. I think I had my first fantasy league, and it was Yahoo, man. They've been doing it the best for a long time.
I'm trying to think how we did waiver pickups then. I mean, did you just call the commission and be like, I want this guy? Or, I mean, you didn't know if you even won you didn't even know if you won your week until Thursday.
Yeah. My God.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the logistics of it all, but I mean, it was pen and paper, and you sometimes would check his work and be like, "Oh, your rushing yards are off," and I'm sure it was wrong all the time.
A couple of other signings, real quick. Metellus and Ferguson. What are your thoughts there for the Cowboys and the Vikings with their recent extensions?
The Ferguson one to me is not a huge story. I mean, we're seeing some tight ends, the Jonnu Smith level guys, sign about that money that are dependable at this stage of their career. That seems like the going rate. I'd love to get Marcus Mosher on here at some point too, but I'm really growing fonder and fonder of the Cowboys' chances of being a contender this year and having a really good offense. I think Pickens could explode. Lamb's going to get a ton of attention. Dak's finally healthy. So I think Ferguson's a very useful third piece. I don't want him as my second piece, but a third piece, now you're talking. Metellus to me is super interesting because I bet there's listeners going, "You're going to spend time talking about Josh Metellus extension?" Like, that's not news, dude. It really is, because Flores is so unique and so aggressive and so many 3, but even more so like 6-man pressures and strange ways of doing things. That's his total skeleton key player. That's his jack of all trades. There's so many Isaiah Simmons that come out of school and like, he can do this, and this. He can play corner. He can play slot. He can play safety. He can play linebacker. And the reality is he can't do any of them at the NFL level or has to specialize in one if they're lucky. I mean, Miles Jack can play slot corner against Wes Welker. No, he can't, because he played a little bit of slot at UCLA. Does not mean he can guard Edelman all day,
Right.
But Metellus can. I mean, that's the thing, is they ask him to play like 5 different positions depending on scheme and opponent, and does them all. So he's worth his weight in gold to Flores in particular.
Rashawn Slater gets a new contract, 4 years, $114 million to be the left tackle, continuing with the Los Angeles Chargers. And I just wanted to mention all the signings here that has happened in the last few days, and this is the most recent, and obviously big money for a really good player. Really, injuries is the only thing that's held him back from, I think, being generally recognized as one of the top left tackles in the NFL at this point.
For his sake, I hope the general public starts to realize that he is one of the top 6-ish left, tackles in the league, period. And the money reflects it. I'm wondering, I did that salary cap spiel about how the only position that's keeping up with the inflation of the salary cap is the edge guys, DN type players. I bet tackles will be there too, because it's such a consistent position. You've had Trent Williams forever. I mean, it's just such a insurance blanket. The top 20 tackles on the planet never hit free agency, just never, ever, ever. And You just basically give them anything they want. It's stability. You can't get them in the draft. You can only get them in the draft, but you have to pick low. I mean, if you're in the tackle market, you got to settle for one of the Moores that came from our 2 teams, like that, and you're going to overpay them by 50% at least. It's just the worst position other than quarterback, but at least quarterbacks come out and you can roll the dice on. Like, nobody wants to, and you got to find 2 tackles, and hopefully the Chargers have one in Alt and Slater, who's tremendous.
Right. And we've seen these teams just over and over again. They just can't fix their offensive line. They're putting resources in, and then they're overpaying mediocre guys just because they need someone that they can trust to be a starter in the NFL. And so a nice place to be for the Chargers. Yeah. Their rebuild isn't quite complete there, but man, that is a nice place to be, to have your franchise quarterback and 2 bookend tackles ready to go.
They had a year skip between Slater and Alt. But there are a handful of teams lately, the Jets, the Saints, the Steelers, that go back-to-back years taking tackles. Even if you hit on one, it's great. But if you hit on both, like the Chargers look like they have, oh, baby. You know what I mean? Like if the Jets with Membo and, those 2, like that would be tremendous.
Especially when you can stagger it. So like Alton Slater is staggered enough where you can structure Alt's next contract to where it doesn't really hit with the biggest money at the same time Slater's is still hitting.
Yeah.
And you can, really never pay both guys at the same time if you don't want to, or you can if you want to, and you can fit it all under the cap.
Pick up 5th year's options, and that kind of stuff too,
So I drew the connection of the Watt signing being and really in Garrett too, because this Trey Hendrickson thing in Cincinnati has been going on for a long time, right? And the longer they wait, the more expensive he gets, which makes him even harder to sign than he was before. And I think there's some of that going on with Terry McLaurin as well, because the wide receiver money is so crazy. And on Friday's show, when you weren't here, Matt, and I want to run this by you, my thought is that it would be difficult. It's not necessarily because Washington and Cincinnati that these contracts aren't getting done. I think it would be hard for any team to figure out how much to pay Trey Hendrickson and Terry McLaurin, because they're very similar in that they're really good players, but they're not at the top of their position group. But their agents would be right to be asking for something close to the top, and the teams would be right to be saying, "Wow, we actually want you to be quite a bit lower than the top," and the top keeps growing, and that means it just makes it more difficult to figure out what the number should be for someone like the next tier of player, like where Terry McLaurin is at wide receivers and where Trey Hendrickson is amongst edge rushers.
That's a really good parallel, because Hendrickson led the league and they're both peaking in a way. Hendrickson led the league in sacks. McLaurin clearly had his best year, but I'm sure the flip side is, well, you finally had a good quarterback. That helped.
It's possible that they've had their best seasons in the NFL too, because it might be,
I think so.
We're paying for the beginning of their back nine. They just made the turn and they're going to hold 10.
Yep, and their positions that do get paid well. How could you possibly let McLaurin go when Daniel's development is so important, and that agent absolutely knows it? McLaurin even came out a year later than you think. Like both those guys weren't juniors, I don't think. They're both as old as you think, if not older too, and have a fair amount of wear and tear. And you'd have to say, how long can I invest in these guys? But they're tremendous players right now, but by no means is McLaurin a top 5 receiver, and Hendrickson is not at the Garrett, Watt, Bosa level. He's really, really good, but you're probably buying at the absolute highest point of the stock. You know what I mean? Like, boy, I love Apple, but this is the highest it's ever been.
But clearly neither team was ready to move off or trade either player either. So, there's value there. So,
they're not 2-win type teams either. They both have big time quarterbacks, and, we're in it to win it right now,
And it sounds like McLaurin's doing the hold in thing, right? Is an injury popped up, a phantom injury popped up. Terry McLaurin, interesting timing there. And then, because that's the other thing, is you don't want to lose money and you start getting fined. And that's where Trey Hendrickson is. And he's on the did not report list, and he's not even in the state of Ohio. So that's where those holdouts are right now.
The Hendrickson one seems more contentious.
Yes. It's been going on a lot longer.
It's been on forever. Like OTAs, he's holding a press conference on the sideline. People forget those things.
And this was happening with him last year. He wanted a new deal, right?
Yeah. So, although the McLaurin one doesn't seem like smooth sailing either.
No, he was one of the sweetheart contracts that got in right before wide receiver money went crazy. So he's been probably in his mind a bargain player already, and it's time to not be a bargain player anymore.
Yeah, and he's got a good case.
Christian Wilkins' story gets a little weirder. And what are the Houston Texans going to do without potentially their starting running back, Joe Mixon, out for an extended period of time? Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Game Time and the Game Time app. Whenever you're trying to get tickets for an NFL game, or how about a concert ticket? We've all been there, right? Logging on early, waiting forever for those concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. And that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, as it gets closer to first pitch, as it gets closer to puck drop, as it gets closer to kickoff, and you can save 60% off with their killer last minute deals. You get panoramic seat views, no surprises on the Game Time app. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you are a sports fan, if you are a fan of music, concerts, comedy, whatever it is, you just got to have Game Time in your pocket, ready to go, period. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and sports tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we had not had an opportunity to talk about the Christian Wilkins saga
don't get it.
because he's on
Hoping you
vacation.
can coach me up on it.
And so essentially, the Raiders released Christian Wilkins after signing to a 4-year, $100 million. Basically, they gave him the same contract that we just saw I want to say Christian Slater, combining Christian Wilkins and Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater, 4 years, over $100 million, right? That was
huge free agency deal.
Yeah, last year Christian Wilkins signed that deal, and they've already released him because of his Jones fracture foot injury that they say that he's not rehabbing properly away from the team and trying to take back the guarantees, which is part of his contract, which is something that I can't remember happening. Can you remember a team saying, and it wasn't like, oh, we want you to give us the guarantees back. They're like, we're voiding them and not paying you the guarantees that are in your contract.
So I'll be very honest.
They're now involved.
I don't quite understand it. I don't have I'm not a cap guy. I'm not a contract expert. I do know that Wilkins at least used to be considered like the highest end maturity leader, team guy. Like, it shocks me that anyone have a beef with him and his work habits or how he, mends his injury. I just wonder if the injury's really, really bad and never going to get worse, and they're just trying to get every dollar they can out of the guy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know the language of the contract. It has to be very specific for them to think that they can do this. But now it's coming out that there was another incident in the locker room that might have been added to it, or part of the reason, according to Josina Anderson, from some player reports inside the locker room, that added to his release. And and now it's like it's getting to, I heard a player said it was this or that, and so it's something with a player in the locker room that was, quote, I want to get the quote right. This is from so there's multiple sources on this story. Josina Anderson is one of them. She didn't go to any details from any of the players that were around, but another reporter did say they got information from a player and said that it was weird, like a very weird incident. According to Mitchell Renz, is the Raiders reporter that had that quote from a player inside the locker room. So something really weird. Someone else was talking about like toe tickling. Like I don't know. Like, just
I was saying, is it something like playing grab ass? Yeah, I mean, like
the player asked them to stop, and so like that's unsubstantiated. I don't know, but apparently there was another locker room thing. What specifically that was with Christian Wilkins, and there is, if you go back to, I think it was the Fiesta Bowl at Clemson, and he just go back and Christian Wilkins, he's done some.
He's an odd dude. I don't know. Yeah.
He's done some weird things in the past. And so
I immediately went to like Charles Haley stuff. I don't know how there's some Charles Haley weird stuff out there in the locker room too. Right?
Look, there's been some odd. You got to be. And a lot of NFL players are really good at just turning it on and off, like between snaps, or between, you walk onto the field between the lines, and now you're kind of a maniac. But you're a normal person off the field. I think it's harder for some players to be a maniac here and not a maniac over here in a lot of cases. Not saying that Christian Wilkins is a maniac, but
right. But perfect example. I was just at that camp, and there's tons of Steelers fans there, but people come from all over Maryland. I mean, the coast, blah blah blah. But and everyone knows what I do there. The same people go every year. So there were 2 or 3 people that are like, I don't know if I can be a Steeler fan anymore. I don't agree with Aaron Rodgers' politics. I'm like, that's fine. Do whatever you want. But I'll tell you what, the other 52 dudes in that locker room, there's some odd birds too. Like
you just haven't heard about it.
Yeah, just don't think he's the only one that's a little different. They have strange lives.
I can't wait for your Aaron Rodgers camp report on tomorrow's episode of Peacock and Williamson, by the way. Is it Nick Chubb season once again? Because it's looking like, I'm looking at the depth chart at running back, which we kind of already called into question post-draft for the Houston Texans. Joe Mixon now with a foot injury, and there's no timetable for his return, but the report is that it could be an extended injury for Joe Mixon, which would mean Nick Chubb is the next guy up on the depth chart for the Houston Texans. Dameon Pierce still around. They never really liked Dameon Pierce, this new coaching staff, it felt like, for Houston. And then they drafted, I think, 6th or 7th round pick, Woody Marks.
Yeah.
That's the group. That's the running back group for the Houston Texans right now. And I don't know what extended means. Does that mean half the season? Does that mean just the rest of camp and preseason?
I know. It's been a little vague, but this is concerning. And he's at that age. He's in that great McCaffrey class, Kamara, where am shocked that that class is going as strong as it is age-wise. We know why he was not an earlier pick when he came out of college. That's not relevant at this point. But he also is not the immense talent that he was coming out of college at this point, where, I mean, the breakaway stuff. But he's super reliable. I mean, he gets 1,000 yards every year. He's right at the top of the list of, like, who is the most rushing yards over the last 3 years combined. Yeah, Mixon's, like, right there. You know, like, you know what you're getting at this point. And you don't know what you're getting with those other guys. You know, Marks and Chubb, to me, are massive wild cards. I can't believe Chubb's ever going to be the same, or he'd have got signed months before he did. I mean, the league told us that they're worried about him. I'm rooting for him. I mean, I think he's been one of the best guys to watch for a long time. But taking it a step further with this specific team, they were so bad running the football on first downs that it was always 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8. And you can blame the O-line, you can blame the scheme, but getting a downgrade at ball carrier can't be helping the cause.
Yeah, and they're still trying to fix the offensive line in front of the ball carrier on top of it, and they think they might have something going on there, but it's, you know, they're not out of the woods in that rebuild of the offensive line yet either. So
I have my doubts about that part too, right?
Right. So not ideal as far as running the football and protecting CJ Stroud there with the Houston Texans. And I just wanted to check Joe Mixon's age, because the running backs from that class are hitting that. He actually just had his birthday this week, July 24th. He turned 29. So 28, that's the cliff, man. So he had his age 28 season, and it's the way it is for running backs in the NFL post age 28. It's what happens, and very few guys are able to have lengthy, impactful careers, you know, from 28 after 28 on. It's just the way it is. It's pretty crazy to think of guys being pretty washed up in their 20s, and Mixon's hitting that part of his career.
I know it's in division, and he wasn't super exciting, but could you get an ATN, or there's probably a back or two's name we could come up with that you could trade for at least?
I mean, ATN would be a perfect fit too, because he's different. Like, they got a bunch of 220-pound backs.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, so we'll stay tuned, and how extended that injury is for Joe Mixon, we will find out, and that'll probably inform the Houston Texans on whether or not they're trying to add another running back. But I don't know how many teams are just willing to be like, because other teams know the attrition at the position too. So they're like, well, we got a good number 2. We want to keep that number 2 because he might be a number 1, and we're not ready to give that up yet. So you might have to wait until the trade deadline if you are the Houston Texans at this point, because we're in camp already.
Not good news.
Thanks everybody for making us your first listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back, Matt Williamson. He's going to be in Latrobe, PA. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers and Steelers camp and everything else going on around NFL training camps on tomorrow's episode. So make sure you tune in and subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.